Hello everyone, the third week of the Genshin Luna 2 beta has recently started, and generally version 3 of betas are the ones containing the most significant kit changes. Following this pattern, Nefer did get a couple yet fairly significant changes to her kit in the third week of her beta. So did she get better or did she get worse? Interestingly, the answer isn't that 100% clear cut and does have some nuance. So to fully answer this question, let's discuss all these significant kit changes made to Nefer in version 3 of her beta cycle, most of which are actually present in the Chinese beta text version since the English one is usually a week behind, and analyze the impact of those changes on her overall strength in the meta. Before we begin, I wanted to let you guys know about an insane collaboration happening with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yes, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which you may have seen while watching cartoons as a kid like me, are being introduced into one of the biggest and most well-known games in the Western market, and the adaptation of the Turtles are actually quite good. Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, Michelangelo, as well as April and Shredder will all be available to play and collect in Raid Shadow Legends. If you log in for 7 days between August 21st and October 30th, you will be able to get Michelangelo for free, a strong defensive support via taunt utility that also buffs the team's damage. As long as you start by October 30th, you can unlock Michelangelo. You'll be able to get the others, Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, April, and Shredder through limited time summoning events, and you'll even be able to fight Shredder in a special event dungeon to earn exclusive gear to get even stronger. On top of the free Michelangelo by logging in for 7 days, if you download and start playing right now using my QR code or links below, you'll unlock a starter pack with 4 more free additional champions. You'll get Karato, the classy edgy swordsman, immediately, as well as Ugo, Vergus, and Tagore once you reach levels 10, 20, and 30. And if you use one of the following promo codes within the first 48 hours of starting raid, you'll get yet another strong legendary hero such as the Monkey King himself. As gacha players, we all love our free characters, and all of Raid's freebies will be insanely helpful to get you all started into the vast amount of PvE and PvP content the game has to offer, which is the main impressive aspect for me. HOYOMiX did say that they plan to have Genshin last 10 or 20 years, so maybe they can take a page from Raid's book to ensure they have a long-lasting game. Feel free to add me in game, I'm of course going to be Andad, and join my clan the Academia, whose name was definitely not stolen from the Sumeru Academia. Remember to make sure you click on my links or scan the QR code so you don't miss on everything Raid has to offer. Thanks to Plarium for sponsoring this video, and a special thanks to Paramount for making the TMNT partnership possible. In terms of pure numerical changes made to multiplier values, the only impactful numerical change that Nefer received was to the damage buff of her A1 passive. This is the core passive that defines Nefer's playstyle, as with Ascended Gleam, when Nefer uses her skill, she pretty much deactivates all bloom cores, preventing you from doing bloom, hyper bloom, and bursion reaction damage. Instead, the bloom cores are converted into Seeds of Deceit, and Nefer absorbs these Seeds of Deceit using her normal charged attack or special charged attack to gain stacks of Veil of Falsehood, which increases the damage of her special charged attacks. Originally, each stack increased the damage of Nefer's special charged attacks by 10%. At the max of 3 stacks, this was a 30% damage increase along with 100 extra elemental mastery. The damage percent increase is actually a multiplier increase, so the 30% damage bonus to Nefer's charge attack damage meant it got multiplied by 1.3, which is a significant damage increase. In the most recent beta, however, this damage buff got nerfed. The 100 EM wasn't changed, but now each stack gives 8% damage to Nefer's charge attack instead of 10%. Thus, at max stacks, Nefer's charge attacks get a 24% damage buff, aka it gets multiplied by 1.24 instead of 1.3. Considering almost all of Nefer's damage comes from her special charge attacks, nerfing the damage buff to them does make a difference. Fortunately, the damage nerf isn't as big as it may seem. Going from 1.3 times to 1.24 times the damage isn't that bad, and Nefer does have sources of damage that isn't affected by this nerf. Mainly, when Nefer is paired with Llama and Llama uses her elemental burst, she grants stacks of Pale Hymn, which increases the damage of Nefer's Lunar Bloom attacks, and this damage isn't affected by the slight nerf to Nefer's A1 passive. Based on pre-release calcs I've seen from multiple theory crafters, this is around a 3% team DPS nerf for Nefer at most, with some teams getting less of a damage decrease. In terms of just Nefer's teams with sustain, so ignoring the Llama C6 Aino Nahida team, which is a little less realistic, Nefer is still around Flynn's level, arguably slightly better with dash cancels and Aino constellations, which is perfectly fine from a meta perspective. So even with this slight nerf, Nefer is still looking like a top tier DPS with Llama. Funnily enough, Nefer teams without Llama are more impacted by the A1 nerf since they don't get the extra damage from Llama's Pale Hymn stacks from her burst, which as I've said already, aren't affected by the passive nerf. So Llama is still a very essential support for Nefer, and without her you will see a big difference. Also, since Nefer's C2 just enhances her A1 passive, the number nerfs to the base A1 passive are also reflected in the C2 numbers. Nefer's C2 allows for 5 5 max stacks of the damage buff, so instead of the previous 1.5 times buff to Nefer's charge attack damage, C2 now only gives a 1.4 times buff, so a slight nerf. Now, while the changes seem to simply be a nerf to Nefer, she also got some nice quality of life updates that arguably outweigh the slight damage nerf she received. Mainly, Nefer got much better resistance to interruption. Before, Nefer only received interruption resistance during her charged attacks. Now, while this sounds fine since Nefer spams charge attacks, according to testers from both the English and Chinese side, they reported that this previous interruption resistance was only active when the shade spawned from her charge attacks, but wasn't active at the start of the animation. This meant that Nefer could theoretically get interrupted out of her charged attack while she's starting to cast it, which would be pretty bad, and it potentially made shielders for Nefer very valuable. However, Nefer now gets interruption resistance immediately after she uses her skill and enters the Shadow Dance state, and currently this interruption resistance is the same level as Skirk's. Thus, with this change, Nefer should have no more problems getting interrupted while performing her special charged attacks. And in terms of Nefer's team building with a defensive support, shielders such as Zhongli, which give interruption resistance, don't have as much value now since Nefer has enough interruption resistance herself, so you will get resistance to interruption even if you run healers like Kuki or Kokomi, or if you're daring and decide to not run any defensive supports. The last major change Nefer received in the 3rd week of her beta was to her A4 passive. Originally, this passive gave Nefer 200 attack when she has at least 1000 EM. Since Nefer is a majority EM scaler, this attack buff didn't really buff Nefer's damage at all, so it was kinda pointless. This passive is now completely reworked. Instead of giving attack based on Nefer's elemental mastery, the passive now affects Nefer's verdant dew generation. Now initially, there was an interpretation of this new A4 passive which suggested that Nefer was able to get 1 extra verdant dew after using her elemental skill and lunar bloom was triggered, so 2 additional verdant dews every rotation. Verdant dew production is very important for Nefer because she needs to consume verdant dew to use her special charge attacks, the main source of her damage. Every rotation she uses 6 charge attacks, so she needs to consume 6 verdant dews, which are normally gated by triggering lunar bloom reactions and waiting 2.5 seconds for each dew to be produced. If the new passive was able to give Nefer teams an additional 2 verdant dews, that would greatly open up Nefer's team building options in the Hydra support slot. Characters like Barbara, who didn't really work because she didn't have enough Hydra application for enough dews, would be much more viable, and even a character like Aino, who is a common recommendation for Nefer, would greatly appreciate the extra dews since there would be much more leeway for verdant dew generation, and this may have been an issue for Z0 Aino with an Electra support like Kuki if you use an incorrect rotation. Unfortunately, this is not how the new A4 passive works. How the passive actually works has been verified by multiple testers, and it is much less impactful than we originally thought. In order for this new passive to activate and quickly generate a verdant dew, the generation being 50% faster as long as Nefer has 1000 EM, Nefer needs to use her skill and enter the Shadow Dance state, then Lunar Bloom needs to be triggered within 5 seconds. Then Nefer will speed in the generation of a verdant dew if she enters the Slither state. The Slither state is normally activated when you use Nefer's unenhanced charge attack, which actually got its stamina cost reduced this beta version. When this happens, she starts sprinting, and this really was just an exploration ability similar to how Llama turns into a deer when you used her normal charged attack. So effectively, Nefer's A4 passive only activates when you don't have any verdant dew to consume to perform her special charged attack. If you have 0 verdant dews available, Nefer will do her sprint ability and the new A4 passive will help generate a verdant dew for you. This is ultimately a passive that only helps you if you play Nefer suboptimally, such as with a Hydro character that doesn't apply enough Hydro at the right time, such as solo Hydro Barbara, and thus won't generate verdant dews for Nefer quickly enough. However, with proper team building and rotations, Nefer's best teams will have enough verdant dew generation normally. Because the Slither state sprint has a long animation, it is likely never optimal to use and only serves as a failsafe when things go wrong. So even though this passive does kind of help non-optimal Nefer teams, which could bring some benefit for some players, the optimal aim is to never actually utilize this passive, which is funny since Hoyoverse made Nefer's new A4 passive arguably worse than the previous attack boosting one, which was also insignificant. So unfortunately, the extra verdant dew dream isn't real at the moment. Ultimately, while Nefer did receive some slight damage nerfs, she did receive some nice quality of life changes, mainly in the form of much better interruption resistance. Depending on how much you value this quality of life, you could argue that despite this slight damage nerf, this was an overall positive beta update for Nefer. We'll see if anything else changes in the upcoming weeks. If you found this beta update helpful, consider liking the video or subbing to the channel so you don't miss out on any future update videos or pre-release guides in the future. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.